Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to my podcast, Don't Get a Therapist Yet. And today, my very special guest is Winnie Akadjo. She's a founder of Aeli Health, and I'm so pleased to have you on my show today, Winnie. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Wendy. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you, Winnie. And you have an amazing story, Winnie, and I'm so happy to have you on the my my podcast today. And I'm really want you to share your story because it's so amazing. Could you just tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, just to start with?
Yes, so at the moment, I am building a new business. So it's a mental health startup. And the goal that I'm trying to achieve with this business is to make it easier for therapists to extend a better continuity of care to clients between therapy sessions. Just through my own lived experiences, I found that actually when you start therapy, it's that time, that you spend by yourself, which equates to 168 hours, that you tend to most probably lean on bad coping mechanisms or really struggle to process a lot of the emotions that comes up. So I want to make it easier for people to actually have the right tools and resources to get through those stages, and ultimately, get through their therapy journey in one piece.
That's such a good organization that you've started to set up, Winnie. And it's obviously from your own personal experience of having therapy. And I see it so necessary because as a therapist myself, I do get concerned about people that I'm supporting, how they are during therapy, between sessions and everything like that. And you're right, especially if there's been a very difficult session that somebody has shared something very deeply personal or traumatic. I think you're so right, and it's so needed. Um, uh, an organization like yourselves, it sounds a really good idea. So well done you for setting it up and getting it running.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we're going to hear a little bit more about the organization as we go on. But can you perhaps start by telling the listeners a little bit about your story? What brought you to therapy?
Ooh, where do I start?
Where do you start? I know it's a big question.
So I actually started therapy after a bad breakup. So I was in a relationship, and during that relationship, at the end, when it kind of came to a close, I really struggled. I guess I was like close to perhaps having suicidal thoughts, not being able to manage, didn't want to go into work. I went into a really deep depression. And it just didn't feel normal and it didn't feel like me. I was 23 at the time. So I read a book. I can't remember if it was referred to me or if I just came across it from just researching. But I came across the book called Women Who Love Too Much, and by Robin Norwood, which is a brilliant book, and I'm really glad I read it when I did. But through reading this book, it talked a lot about like, bad coping mechanisms, like toxic relationships, as well as the characteristics that are attached that lead us into these types of relationships. And at the end, it made a lot of recommendations in terms of what you could do. And one of those things was to have therapy. And prior to that, I had heard of therapy, but I'd never done therapy. So I self-referred. I found a women's therapy center and I self-referred myself. I just kind of wrote down everything. I was like, this is me, and this happened to me, and that happened to me, and all of these things. And they accepted my case and they offered me 20 therapy sessions, which was the start of my therapy journey. But what I'd actually said in that email in terms of the things that did happen to me. So one of them was being sexually abused before the age of 12. And then I left home. I was kicked out of home and I went into foster care. So I lived in foster care for a little bit and I lived in a children's home. And then I became a mother at the age of 15. So I got pregnant with my son and at 14, and I had a son at 15. And I'd actually attempted suicide at 19, and I was hospitalized for 8 weeks. And then I had this bad breakup. So already that was a lot.
Absolutely, Winnie, so much. It's so young as well, so young. My goodness me, what a
Exactly.
story. Yeah.
Yes, then it was at that point, they then took on my case and they offered me the therapy sessions. So it was during therapy that my therapist actually helped me understand how my experiences had impacted my mental health. Because I think we go through life and sometimes, bad things happen to us, but we don't always know the impact that it has. And that was me. I didn't realize that the impact that I had as a child had such a massive impact. I was just kind of like floating around and doing whatever. So once I started those sessions and she kind of started talking to me about those challenges, and she'd also diagnosed me with complex PTSD, it was a lot to take in. It was really difficult because it wasn't anything that I had thought of before, that I had known, and I didn't realize that there were so many people who were actually impacted by similar situations and similar problems. So it was really heavy, and I think for those first couple of sessions, I would come home and I did not know how to process my emotions. It was just so much. So I would drink wine. I remember I would just like drink wine and just forget about it. And then for somebody who didn't really drink prior to that, then alcohol kind of became the bad coping mechanisms, to just kind of forget a lot of the stuff that I was hearing and that I was being told. And I didn't really have the right tools to process it. So after the initial sessions, I then went on, a 10-year therapy journey essentially. And that went from having more therapy. So then I had different forms of therapy. I had art therapy, which was really good, just kind of like drawing out my inner child and a lot of the moods that I was feeling at the time. I had group therapy, which I really struggled with just because hearing other people's stories like was really difficult. And it was more like reprocessing the trauma and kind of reliving it. So I really struggled to do group therapy, so I didn't continue with the sessions. But then I started reading more books, just speaking to people and understanding just the landscape in terms of like trauma and the experiences that are attached to it. And then I was introduced to an EFT therapist who I then had some sessions with. And I think that was the first time that I felt the physical load shifting,
Brilliant.
because it's a lot of weight that lives in the body.
So good. Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I had all of this weight that I was carrying around
Mm,
everywhere. So it was only when I had EFT, I was like, oh, I feel so much lighter. I feel
fantastic.
like,
Yeah.
that I'm lifting off a lot of those things that were like tied down.
Winnie, can I just ask you for the audience is what to say what EFT stands for and perhaps say a little bit more about the technique. Is that okay? Because
Yeah,
people
that's
might not have heard
fine.
of it. Yeah.
So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And the way the sessions were, so essentially the therapist would ask me to like close my eyes, and she would, we would go back to different scenes that were part of the trauma. And what I'd need to do in those moments was basically like take my inner child, so take myself out of those situations and into a place where I felt safe. Um, and do that repeatedly across all the different types of emotions that were tied, all the different experiences, excuse me, that were tied to the emotions. And after each session, I felt a lot lighter, and I felt safer. And from a mental perspective as well, it meant that when I sometimes thought about those experiences, I would think of myself in a safe space. rather than the initial memories that I had. So I guess in a way it was almost like rewiring my memories as well. So I found that to be really pivotal as part of my therapy journey. So then I started doing that, and then along the way, I started a business, and I couldn't afford to have private therapy as much as I wanted to. And I also started investing more time in my faith. So I'm a Christian, and I started kind of like listening to seminars and reuniting with my faith because one thing that had happened was that when, I did have those bad childhood experiences, I kind of forsake my faith because I was like, if there is a God, how could this happen to me? Why would all these terrible things happen to me? So I just refused to believe because I was like, either I'm not wanted or I'm not cared about. So I refused to believe. So then I went on this kind of like therapy journey, sorry, faith journey to kind of reconnect with my religion. And it was through that I was able to, I guess, go through an element of acceptance, accepting what had happened to me. I was also actually able to see a lot of the silver lining, so a lot of the good things that happen amongst the bad things. So whether it was like the key workers who really supported me when I was in care, or whether it was the opportunity to go back to school and then go back to college, or whether it was like how I really luckily was able to get my flat when I was still really young. A lot of these things were almost like reminders in terms of how I've been protected and how God had essentially extended like care to me, even those difficult moments. So that's what kind of helped me find peace with the with the trauma and the things that had happened. And there are still moments, there are still days. I think one thing that I haven't done that I'm kind of working on now is how to be without the trauma because the trauma was so attached to me and everything that I did and how I responded and all of these things. So now I'm almost having to rebuild myself, and get to know myself because there were also like bad habits that was attached to that. So for example, drinking and smoking. So learning how to live life without depending on these things and not having it as part of who I am has meant that I'm now having to learn new coping mechanisms. And even just in terms of like managing relationships with some of the people who had caused a lot of pain or who had been affected as part of my trauma, also having to learn and think about, okay, how do I want to move forward? How do I want to deal with this? Are these people that I still want to have contact with? Do I not want to have contact with? So that's the phase that I'm in now. And I don't have all the answers. I literally just live day by day, and hope it will all get clearer. But yeah, that's kind of been my 10-year journey from the moment I wrote that email.
And what an amazing story, Winnie, and your dedication to getting yourself better through therapy is just it's up there in kind of absolute respect for you to work so much on yourself
Thank
and get to the point where you can even consider that there's some silver linings in your story. It's so great. And because it could be very easily, you could easily, and you haven't, you could be bitter and very angry with the world and people,
you.
but it doesn't sound
I
as though
did
you
go
are.
through that phase. I did go through the
Yeah.
phase where I was bitter, I was angry, but I've had to, I think my faith has also played a big part in bringing me that peace, and just letting go because it's a lot of weight to hold on to.
Mm. Mm. And that's again a very good thing that you're saying, that ability to let it go. It's very, very hard, isn't it? Because like you say, what, especially being so young and to suffer child sexual abuse at your age, it can be so damaging to a person, and probably you weren't even aware of how damaging it was, I think is what you're saying, and how you can really hold on to that, but that fact you've let that go and that's made you feel lighter. It's a lovely description of somebody who is working on her trauma to feel
Thank
lighter. so not so attached to the trauma. Because I think, sometimes trauma can become your identity as well, if that makes sense, Winnie. Have you ever felt that, you are the trauma's part of you and you never can leave it? Have you ever felt like that?
Mm, I do feel like these are experiences that have molded me.
Mm,
Sometimes I do think, who would I be? How would I be if these things didn't happen to me? So I guess it's almost grieving the part of me that I'll never know. Um, but accepting that these things have happened and this is what I can do about it now. But still wondering, like, what would my life be like if none of this happened? Would it be better? Would it be worse? I don't know.
mm. And I think that's, you describe that really well. It's sort of like the loss of the potential you, the loss of your impact as a young woman, and the experiences that you could have had and you haven't. You can accept and see that is a part of a mourning process.
Yeah.
But what I really like about what you're saying is you've turned your story into something amazing. You've turned your story into a service to help other people who have gone through similar problems as you have, and you've turned it right round. And I don't think you probably would have done that if you hadn't had all the all the traumatic experiences that you've had.
No, definitely not, because I just wouldn't have been thinking about it and I wouldn't have related to so many people who go through the same type of traumas as well. So I think that's really helped play a part. But more importantly, it's just that I didn't know until I started therapy, until I started actively investing time in understanding more about how trauma has like impacted my life and stuff. I didn't know. I just thought I was fine, I just thought I was normal. I was just maybe drinking too much, smoking too much, and just kind of living in a haze. And that's what really inspires me because I think how many people are just living in that haze, and they just think this is fine, this is just normal, but it's not. And they're missing out on the opportunity to really help themselves and become better.
Mm, absolutely. And you make a really good point as to, when you start processing those traumas, it can make you more vulnerable to start off with. And of course, naturally, what you want to do is to forget that and dampen it all down through alcohol. And how many people probably do the same thing as that they dampen down their traumas through some kind of, drug misuse or something like that, because it's so awful to contemplate.
Absolutely. And that's what also has me thinking sometimes because we also have, the UK does have a big drinking culture. And I think how much of that is normal and how much is that actually people just escaping the emotions that they don't want to feel, and the things that they haven't had a chance to process.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. And again, that might be something, like you say, that part of your journey is understanding that part of your organization that you're a founder member of. That will be a very interesting question to ask people how that's what it's about, how they cope between therapy sessions and, asking them whether they are dampening down in some way some of the trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, I have already started doing some research and the findings are really insightful. A lot of it is related to like overconsumption of something, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's other habits. So that's been really interesting to see. Um, and also just the blind spots that people have, perhaps,
Mhm.
in not making those associations. But you don't know what you don't know, so you can't blame people.
No, I don't think for 1 minute you're blaming people at all. You've got such a good empathy, awareness, and understanding of wanting to help people through their therapy journey as well. I just wanted to go back to one point you made, Winnie, as people might not know what the diagnosis complex PTSD is. Are you okay to perhaps share a little bit more about your experience of what the symptoms were, but also how you felt actually having that as a diagnosis?
Yeah, so this is something that I've been spending more time trying to understand in the last couple of years, because I think prior to that, I was very much living with my complex PTSD, but I wasn't aware of my complex PTSD. So how it would impact me before, I think for me, it's associations. So if I'm in, now I can explain it, but before I couldn't. So for example, if I was in contact with people who had been associated or part of my trauma, I would feel really overwhelmed and I'd want to escape. So I would sometimes, visit people, and whilst I'm there, I would just be like, I need a drink. And what I didn't realize was that I didn't feel comfortable in those spaces because some of the associations were bringing me back to kind of like the trauma experiences that I had. And this would extend to like names, so people's names. This would attend to like personalities. So I would pick up a lot of like personality traits or characteristics or things that would resemble a lot of the traumas that I had. And that would put me in like a hypervigilant mode, essentially. It could also be smells. Sometimes I would smell something and it would just take me back as well. So that's been difficult, and it's still something that I'm trying to, now that I'm aware of it, I know that it's happening. And it has encouraged me to perhaps stay away from just like certain personality types, certain individuals, because they do bring that out of me. So that's one. Another one is the flashbacks. So EFT was good during those moments to help me, but sometimes they do come back. So I do have flashbacks of like, my childhood or moments where I felt fear and stuff, and they come back unwillingly a lot of the time. So now I'm able to kind of like ground myself and remember that I'm safe and kind of keep myself calm. But that is definitely something that I had struggled with as well. And then fight or flight mode, just constantly being anxious. I remember the first time, it sounds weird, but it was like, I think I used to walk on tiptoes, almost like my feet were always a little bit elevated from the ground. And I think when I just through like my therapy and stuff, I remember there was a day where my feet actually felt the ground, and I could tell because I kind of felt that connection between my feet and the ground, and it felt very grounding to some degree. So I think I was always on edge, always slightly anxious, always slightly like not feeling safe. So that was a really good element as well. What are some other, those are some of like the three core kind of symptoms that I know that I deal with on a day to day. But there are loads of other PTSD, complex PTSD symptoms, and it can look different on everyone. But for me, it's really about those associations, those mental associations and moments, the flashbacks, and feeling just anxious, not being at peace, just not feeling calm, and constantly being on edge.
Mhm. Yeah, and very hard to live with. And like you say, first of all, you were in a care home, which must have been very um, difficult, I would have thought, to be in a care home. And then you went on, and then you got pregnant, and then you were a single mum at age 15. I mean, that's my goodness me. I mean, how did you manage those two situations?
I don't even know. I look at 15-year-olds now and I just think, Winnie, what were you thinking? I was like, you're a baby. So it's funny. How did I manage? So when I first had my son, I lived with my auntie for a little bit, which was helpful. So I started living by myself with my son when I was 17. And I think this is where my kind of like ambition has always played a big part. Because I remember when I got pregnant with my son, for me, it was really about having a family. It was like, well, I'm by myself. So if I've got my son, then at least, we'll be like a family. So I was really motivated to not just like be fit for the scraps, basically. So I wanted to push myself and, get the best and do the best for us. So that was my underlying motivation. And it was hard. I think now when I look back, there are moments that I do feel sorry for myself. I'm like, oh my God, Winnie, I can't believe like you had to go through all of that and you did it yourself. Um, but I had that underlying willpower to just make something out of myself. Because also, when I was pregnant, everybody was like, oh, you're not going to make it in life and you're not going to do anything. And, your life is ruined. So I was like, no, I'm going to prove them wrong,
Yeah.
and I'm going to go out there and do what I need to do. So, yeah, that was kind of like my underlying motivation. And I had some support from like my friends, people in the community, people who were willing to help. And because I was young, there was still a lot of like government support that I was able to get for like childcare, education, and a lot of those things. So all of that really played a part in helping me get through those years.
Mm. And in many ways, your story is so significant to get pregnant at 15 and to take that on board. And like you said, lots of judgments, lots of negativity. And I love the way you turned that round and said, I'm going to prove them wrong, that I'm will, after everything you've been through, you had the I'm will discipline and motivation to prove them wrong and to succeed as a mum and to take responsibility and raise your son. I mean, it's such a wonderful story, and I hope it inspires others who have maybe had a similar story to you, Winnie, and people have said to them, you've wasted your life, all those kind of negative comments, to say to them, no, if I've got that strong iron discipline and willingness and motivation, I can still turn things round. That's something, which is really, really important that you had. Underlying it all was your determination to succeed.
Thank you. And yeah, and that's one of my goals now to share more and to talk more because I didn't really talk about it before. Like most people, some people don't even know I've got an 18-year-old son. Sometimes they find out for the first time. A lot of people don't really know like my background and my experiences. So coming on this podcast and just sharing, even building my business, it's also my way of kind of letting people know that yes, this is a journey that you can go through. This is what I've accomplished. And I want to, create more encouragement for women who've gone through the journey or going through something similar.
Mm. And I think you've challenged the stereotype, haven't you? You've challenged the stereotype of, someone in care got pregnant early, dot dot dot. You are such an inspiration to others to say, that doesn't have to be your story. You can still have dreams, and you were supported, rightly so, and that's a really healthy thing. And it's good to hear that there was support for you as well. But you can turn everything around and actually follow your dreams because you're a living example of what you can do, Winnie. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Um, Perhaps we can just tell the third part really, just to sort of perhaps tell people a little bit more where you are in your business. And I understand you haven't mentioned, I think you've won an award.
Yes, so I was in a venture studio. So I actually built my business through a venture program. And a venture studio is where you go with an idea and they help you kind of like, validate whether that idea is worth pursuing and what you can build in that space and how you can move it forward. So it was called Block Dojo. And as part of the program, I had to present my business idea. And I was really caught between playing it safe and just kind of being like, yeah, this is a tool that I want to build, etc. And like sharing my story. So in those weeks, it was really difficult because this is the first time I'd really shared my story like publicly and at that scale to a room full of strangers. Um, so I did that, and the focus was really around how to help people who have experienced PTSD, to access the right tools and resources that they need to help them. And it was off the back of that, they then had like a vote for, the idea that resonated the most, that had the most potential. And I won the People's Choice Award, which was really nice. And I had so many people come up to me and be like, my wife went through this, I went through this, like I know this experience, I had all of this stuff, and it was really encouraging because I thought to myself, had I not shared, the story, had I not spoken, people wouldn't have felt that like resonate, they wouldn't have resonated as much. Um, so I was really happy to have gone through the difficult path, coming out of my comfort zone, as they say, and winning the award. So yeah, that was a really great moment. I'm really proud of it.
And so you should be, and to open yourself, to be vulnerable, to tell your story, and to risk judgment as well. Some people, well, people judge you for whatever you do anyway nowadays, and but to sort of like rise above that and say, you've got a higher goal really. Something higher is about, reaching out to people who've had similar experiences to yourself and can really relate to your story. And there's so many people, I believe, who can relate to your story as well, Winnie. So you managed to overcome the fear of being judged, I suppose, and shared your story. And it's good to hear you have been very well rewarded for that regarding your award. So good for you. Good for you for
Thank
doing
you.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm building the muscle. Like, that was one, and this is another one, and I've done another talk. So I'm definitely building that muscle and getting stronger at it. And it was funny because what I've always been really proud of kind of also could have like been could have kind of hit me back in the face. So my pitch coach, I remember she said to me, she was like, I know you're used to being this really strong boss woman, like, getting everything done, but now you need to be really vulnerable and you need to pull in the audience and you need to tell your story. And I was like, oh my God. How
Thanks.
do I even do that? So that was really the moment where I had to really get in tune with like my inner self and really be confident in doing it. But it was hard. It was really
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, yeah, good. But thank you so much for being open to sharing your story and to use it as a example of how you can, be positive about your future, wherever you come from, whatever you've been through, you can turn that around. And I'm so pleased that that therapy has been good for you and helped you. But I also think you're identifying some problems and some gaps, which is very positive as well. So just a little bit more about your actual where you are in your business then, and if people are interested in getting in touch with you, how would they do that, Winnie?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. So it's under my name, which I'm sure will be on this podcast, so people
Yes.
can find me there. Also on the website, so it's aeli.io, Aeli, and they're able to see the demo. Like so far, I've built a platform that allows therapists to share tools and resources with clients between sessions and also capture their kind of like moods, triggers, things that they may be struggling with that they need more support with in the therapy session. So that's kind of where I am now, but I'm looking to develop more tools as the product grows over time.
Yeah, it sounds great. And it's like any business, you start somewhere and things grow and things develop. Okay. So that's great. And those details will be in the show notes. All of Winnie's contact details will be there. And Winnie, I just want to thank you very personally for being just so open about your experiences. And it's such an amazing story. And it's turned out so well for you. And I'm sure we're going to see more of you as well. This is just the beginning, it's just going to get better and better. So thank you so much, Winnie. And
Thank you for having me, Wendy. It's been great, and I'm really glad that you've been a part of my new journey. And yeah, so it's been great. Thank you.
yeah, and thank you everyone for listening.